السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the subject of al-fiqh, the fiqh of worship, briefly taking notes and studying inshallah ta'ala, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who benefit from what we learn, to keep this religion alive in our life by seeking the knowledge of it and by passing it to the next generation, and from one generation to the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save that religion in the hearts of the people. And the ilm, as we know, is not just information for a person to get a degree, but it's the action that a person applies as a result of that ilm, as a result of that knowledge. It's the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heart that a person would have as a result of knowing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from oneself. And to be honored that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High, He reveals to the Prophet ﷺ what every single human being should do. And that's an honor by itself for someone to get to know and then to apply what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Last time we were talking about Sunan al-Fitra and the obligations of Wudu. Now, and the obligations of Wudu as mentioned in the verse in the Quran, and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And that for every action we have to have two conditions for it: the sincerity of intentions and correctness of it, which is by following the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And we talked about the obligations of wudu as being 6 obligations. If you remember, as mentioned in the ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, in that particular order, because the order is one of the obligations. Obligations to wash the face, and from that is to do the madmada and the istinshaq, the mouth and the nose, washing the hands to the with the mirfaqayn, with the elbows, to wipe the head, and from the head the 2 ears, and to wash the foot to the ankles, and to do that in order. These particular orders, these particular organs are to be done in order, and al-muwala, the continuity of it, and not to stop it in the middle for a long period of time. And when we talked about the obligation, when we need to know the ruling that these are obligations, because if a person happened to miss one of them or so, well, then the wudu is not valid. It's not that a person would just do the obligations. The ilm, if a person get to know something, if it leads for the person to leave an action of goodness, that's not a good sign of the ilm. Right? Like, for example, someone didn't know that, these are the obligations of wudu, and used to make full wudu. So now he got to know the obligations, so he quit doing certain things in wudu because it's not an obligation. So the ilm caused them to leave something. That's not a good sign. The ilm should make the person even do more and more. But just in the case when a person didn't do something or so, he couldn't, or something of that nature, then that's the benefit of that particular part of knowledge. So these are the obligations of wudu. What are the sunan of the wudu? And we didn't talk yet about how to make wudu. Usually the ulama in the books of fiqh, they talk about the obligations, the conditions, the recommended acts and things like this, and then at the end they talk about how to make wudu, or how to make the salah in the perfect way. So what are the recommended acts? What are the sunan of wudu? Just mention some of them inshallah ta'ala, which is siwak, to use the siwak right before the wudu, because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك عند كل وضوء. Another hadith عند كل صلاة. لولا أن أشق, if it wasn't to make it difficult for my ummah, I would have ordered them to use the siwak with every wudu. And عند is very close, not 5 minutes before wudu, but right when you are making wudu, right before it. So siwak, to use the siwak before the wudu. And if a person doesn't have the siwak, if he wants to wash his, use a toothbrush or whatever, to clean the mouth before the wudu, basically, but mainly with the siwak. Also, one of the sunnah of the wudu is to wash the hands 3 times in the beginning. To wash the hands 3 times, which is the first thing that we do in wudu. And we talked about the importance or the significance of knowing the difference between the sunnah and the obligations. That when you wash your hands 3 times before the wudu or the beginning of the wudu, it's not an obligation, this is sunnah, meaning this is recommended. That means when you wash your hands again with the elbows, which is an obligation that comes after washing the face, you have to start with the tips of your fingers first. That means the fingers and the palm included in washing the hands with the elbows. And this is an obligation that has to be done in that particular order after washing the face. So therefore, because some people might, because they wash their hands in the beginning of the wudu, so when they wash their arms with the elbows, they don't wash their hands again or the palm again. And that's something that is very dangerous. Why? Because this is an obligation. So when you wash your arm with the elbows, it's not just the arms, it's also the hands. So you have to wash it again from the tip of the finger and between the fingers and the arm and also the elbows. So the washing the hands 3 times in the beginning of wudu, this is from the recommended acts of wudu. Number 3, to start with the madmada, then al-istinshaq, before washing the face. So after you wash your hands 3 times, you start with the madmada. Madmada is when you wash your mouth from the inside, and you gargle to move the water inside of your mouth, and then you spit it out. And the al-istinshaq is to get the water into the nose, and if you can, to the upper part of the nose, and then with the left hand, you blow it out. And all can be done with 1 handful of water, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do that, as the hadith of Bukhari and others. 1 handful of water, you put some in your mouth, and then the rest in the nose, and you sniff it up, and then with the left hand, you blow it out, meaning your nose. So from the sunnah is to do that before washing the face. Before washing the face. So that means if a person washes his face first and then make madmada and istinshaq afterwards, does he break the order that is a pillar of the salah of the wudu? No, he did not break the order, because the mouth and the nose are from the face. But it's recommended to do them before washing the face. So this is one of the sunan of the wudu. So siwak, washing the hands 3 times, starting with the madmada, then al-istinshaq, the mouth and the nose, before washing the face. Also another sunnah or recommended act for wudu, takhleel al-lihya, is to put the fingers in the I think we talked about this in wudu, is to go with the fingers into the beard that is thick. If the beard is thick, you wash the face, and then with the hands, with the fingers, to go inside from the bottom of the beard, so that the fingers would go inside of the thick beard. If it's a short beard, you can see the face through, then you have to wash the face. So takhleel al-lihya. Takhleel is when you use your hands to go into the beard with your fingers. Another sunnah, at-tayamun, right? At-tayamun, to use the right hand first, or the right foot first when you're washing something that is the hands or the foot, is to use the right first. Another sunnah is to wash a second time or a third time, and the 3 times are the perfect one. But it's not permissible to do more than 3 times. 1 is sufficient, but a person should not always do 1, he should do more. And to say the particular dua after the wudu, we'll talk about that inshallah ta'ala, and to pray 2 rak'ah after the wudu. And we talked about that before also. So these are the sunnah of the wudu. How many sunnah of wudu we have? How many sunnah of wudu we mentioned? This was mentioned last time too. Anyone? 8 now. 8. So as-siwak, check your notes again to make sure that you have them all, inshallah. As-siwak, washing the hands 3 times, washing the mouth and the nose before washing the face. That's number 3. تخليل اللحية, to wash the beard with your finger, getting the fingers inside of the beard. To use the right first. Number 5, to use the right before the left. Number 6, the second and the third washing. Number 7, to make the dua after wudu, the specific dua after wudu. And number 8, to pray the 2 rak'ah after wudu, or prayer after wudu. One of the ways of the Prophet ﷺ in wudu is not to use extensive amount of water, but use to what is sufficient. And the Prophet ﷺ used to make wudu with a mud. The mud is what fits 2 palms, a normal size of water. And therefore it is not permissible to wash the arms or the foot more than 3 times. 3 times is the max. And it's not permissible to do more. And that's to push away the waswas and the whispers of shaitan and so on. Now, the Prophet ﷺ used to make wudu with a mud. Al-mud is what fits 2 palms together. And therefore it is not permissible to wash what is supposed to be washed 3 times. It's not permissible to wash them more than that, 4 times or 5 times. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever do this, فَقَدْ أَسَاءَ وَتَعَدَّى وَظَلَمَ, he had did wrong, he had transgressed and did evil by washing more than what is sufficient for the wudu. And that is, the wisdom behind it is to push away the whispers of shaitan, the waswas, and not to be so much attached to so much water, using so much water. This is something that a person should not make israf or excessiveness in, even if the water is available and everything is fine. Another point or mas'ala that you need to take a note of, that is, we don't usually make, alhamdulillah, when we make wudu, we make wudu by turning on the tap water and everything is easy. But what if a person is making wudu from a container, right? Whether there's no water, so you have to put water in a container and then you make wudu from a container, or you're outside camping, or, the deen of Islam is valid for everybody and every person on the face of earth. And many people, this is their norm, is they make wudu from a container. If a person makes wudu from a container, there's a very important point that many people do not know. And that is, if a person wakes up after the night sleep, it is not permissible to put both hands in the container of water, right? Unless he pours some out to wash his hands first. Again, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, إِذَا اسْتَيْقَظَ أَحَدُكُم مِّن نَوْمٍ, if one of you wakes up from his sleep, فَلَا يَغْمِسْ يَدَهُ فِي الْإِنَاءِ, he should not immerse or dip his hand in the container of water, حَتَّى يَغْسِلَهَا ثَلَاثًا, till he wash it 3 times first, outside of the container. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ, because he does not know where his hands had been when he was asleep or during the night. The hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. So therefore, if the container is the place where a person makes wudu from, it is not permissible to dip the hands in when a person wakes up from sleep. Rather, he should pour some out to wash his hands first 3 times, and then he can dip his water inside to get the water for the wudu. So this is, something to be done if a person gets up from sleep for wudu, if he makes wudu from a container. And washing the hands 3 times here in this case is not the 3 times that is part of the wudu. This is so that he would allow himself to put his hand in the container. Okay, so now how to make wudu after all of what is mentioned, right? And after you do this, if you're making wudu from a container, yes, you wash it 3 times afterwards as part of the wudu. So these 3 times is not part of the wudu, it's separate. There is a hadith, famous hadith about the wudu. The narrator of the hadith is Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. This hadith is always mentioned when the wudu is mentioned. That one of the servants of Uthman radiallahu anhu, he saw him making wudu. And when he called for for a container, for a plate or something that has water in it. فأفرغ على كفيه 3 مرار فغسلهم. He poured on his hands 3 times and he washed his hands 3 times. Then he put his right hand in the ina or in the container and he got water out. فمضمض واستنثر. He used it for his mouth and his nose from one handful. And then he washed his face 3 times. Then his arms with the elbows 3 times. Then he wiped his head back and forth. Then he washed his legs or his foot 3 times. Right? So having the intentions in the heart, washing the hands 3 times, making madmada and istinshaq from one handful, if a person can, and you can train yourself, it's easy. And then you do that 3 times, then washing the face 3 times, and washing the right hand with the elbows 3 times, then the left hand. Then you wipe the head 1 time, but going back and forth from the beginning of the head all the way to the back of the head. Then he comes back in the same way to the front. And then you put your sabbabatin, the forefinger, inside of the ears with the same water that you wipe the head, and the index finger to wipe the back of the ears. So the ears are wiped from inside out. And to wash then the right foot with the ankles 3 times, then the left, to make sure that between the toes also is the takhlid, yukhallil. There are 2 things that you make takhlid of: the beard, if it's thick, and between the fingers and between the toes with one's pinky or with one's fingers. And then to make the wudu that we'll talk about inshallah. And Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he made this wudu, he said in the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, he said, "Man tawadda'a nahwa wudu'i hadha," whoever makes the like of my wudu. ثم صلى ركعتين, then he prays 2 rak'ah, but with a condition. لا يحدث فيهما نفسه, he does not speak to himself in these 2 rak'ah. That means he's focused on these 2 rak'ah, that his mind does not drift away. Focused on these 2 rak'ah, غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه, his previous sins will be forgiven. His previous sins will be forgiven. And that's why the wudu washes away the sins. The salah washes away the sins. That's why this is one of the ways of repentance, is to make wudu and to make salah. So the hadith of Uthman, remember the hadith of Uthman radiallahu anhu, the famous hadith about the wudu. And he said, whoever makes the like of this wudu, then he prays 2 rak'ah, لا يحدث فيهما نفسه. One of the conditions for the forgiveness of the sin is that he does not speak to himself, he does not whisper to himself, he's focused on the salah. So, the salah, another mas'ala, I want you to also mention that as a point here. Can we, or do we have to make wudu for every salah? As far as obligation is concerned, it's not mandatory as long as a person is in state of wudu. But as we said, it's a recommended thing, especially that if a person feels that he was busy with things, maybe he saw something or he said something. So it's something that is important to then make the wudu to wash away the sins and the one weaknesses and so on. Right? So this is, when it comes to the general meanings or the general rulings of the wudu. After the wudu is done, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man tawadda," whoever makes wudu, and then he says, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله, the 8 gates of Jannah will be opened for him to enter from whatever gate he wishes. This hadith is in Sahih Muslim. So after the wudu, this one dua is to say, it's a very easy to remember, the shahadateen. Ashhadu, but say ashhadu. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Don't forget wahdahu la sharika lah. I bear witness that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah. Wahdahu, alone, la sharika lah, he has no partner. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a slave and messenger. The reward, the 8 gates of Jannah will be opened for him to enter from whatever gate he wishes. This is one dhikr. The other dhikr is, which is also authentic in reported by Nisa'i and others, is that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Man tawadda, whoever makes wudu, then he says, Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. So, Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. This is to be said one time. Just say it slowly so that you would know. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Whoever says this, kutiba fi raq, it will be written in a paper also. ثم طبع بطبع, it will be sealed. فلم يكسر إلى يوم القيامة, it would not be broken till the day of judgment. So this is a great rewards, right? So what's to be said in wudu is, as we heard, is to say Bismillah when you start the wudu, and after the wudu you say this. These 2 adhkar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Then you say Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. And there is no other dhikr to be mentioned in wudu while a person is making wudu. Some people, they say certain things with every organ that they wash. They were told to say this or to say that. There is no azkar reported from the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So that's the end of what is the subject of the wudu. And we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, because of the time. So, jazakumullah khairan, and we'll continue, inshallah ta'ala, next time. And make sure, inshallah, that you have your notes with you, inshallah. Barakallahu feek. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.